Good morning. How's everyone doing? Thanks for sparing the time to listen to us today. We're going to be talking about Data Strategy Unleashed, in particular how to deliver impactful outcomes and stakeholder alignments. This is important to us because data strategy is something everyone talks about. It's too often very theoretical, and we want to make it really practical and say, how can you actually have some tangible outcomes to show from that? Just some very quick introductions. So my name is Mohammed Syed. I've been a digital transformation consultant for about 20 years, worked across central government, healthcare, and all sorts of other places. Currently working with eSynergy. eSynergy is a specialist digital transformation consultancy focused on delivering outcomes. And joined today by Neil. Neil, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's Neil McIver. I'm the Chief Data Officer at the Department for Education. What I'm going to talk about today are going to be my personal views. They aren't the views of the department. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the big data challenges that I feel we have across government at the moment. I'm going to be a little bit controversial as well, because I think a little bit of controversy generates thought and good questions. So, my assessment, I think we've got some great areas of expertise in government. We've got world-class analytical function. We've got brilliant digital data and tech experts across government. ... but. And the big but is I still think, and I really feel that we have widespread misunderstanding across government about what data is. So often in government we talk about data for analysis. We either take data for granted, or we think data equals analysis, and there's no ground in between. Now, if you think about the poet laureate uses words from the dictionary to create art. And our brilliant analysts use data to create brilliant insight. But other people use words as well, not just the poet laureate. And other people use data as well, not just analysts. And we need to understand all those wider uses of data across government departments to really build our data maturity. And this is why, in my view, that government departments need to continue to follow industry best standards and recruit chief data officers. Many, but not all, government departments have chief data officers, but do we really understand what the function of a CDO is? What should they do, and where should they sit? Now, I'm just going to read a little paragraph. This was from Gartner, from a study they did a couple of years ago, and they defined what they thought the Chief Data Officer should be. So the CDO is a senior executive who bears responsibility for the firm's enterprise-wide data and information strategy, governance, control, policy development, and effective exploitation. The CDO's role will combine accountability and responsibility for information protection and privacy, information governance, data quality, and end-to-end data lifecycle management, along with the exploitation of data assets to create business value. And I think that's exactly right. And in my view, this view is reflected in wider industry as well, is that the Chief Data Officer is not a subset of tech. It's not a subset of analysis. It's in effect the policy lead for data in the department. And in terms of government functions, I strongly believe that the CDO best sits in the digital data and technology function. You know, there's a bit of a clue there, isn't it? It's digital data and technology. And we're not just here to support our analytical laureates, although that's a really, really important part of our job. We need to support the wider department and wider government. We need to ensure that digital services are based on sound data footings with cross-departmental and cross-government interoperability. We need to ensure that our internal business processes, our HR systems, our resource management systems are based on sound data footings. We need to ensure that our departmental operational activities are based on sound data footings, so that we can map business processes with data and information flows, and we can ensure that a single source of what's happening at any point of that end-to-end process. Now, the slide that you see in front of you at the moment shows my accountabilities within the Department for Education, and as you see, I wear many, many hats. But the really important one for me, and this is where I get into a little bit of conflict with some security colleagues, is I actually also run the data protection function and the data ethics function for the department. And there's a big debate in government whether data protection should sit under security, or should data protection sit under chief data officer? Well, I've got it, and so that's why it's my view that it should sit there. But also, where should the chief data officer sit in the organisation? And again, according to Gartner, increasing trend in industry is for a CDO to report either directly to the chief executive officer, or to the chief finance officer, or to the chief operating officer. And they should be either at board level or board level -1. Now, I sit at board level -1 in our department. And I firmly believe as well that the seniority of your leading data expert is an indication of how seriously an organisation values its data. So I sit as a director, I sit alongside the chief digital officer, I sit alongside the chief technology officer, and the three of us, the inglorious troika as we call us, we are collectively accountable for our digital data and technology function, and the three of us all report into our chief operating officer. I also sit alongside the department's chief analyst as well, who sits in another part of the department. And I think it's really, really important that data is valued as much as digital, as much as technology, and as much as analysis. So the next slide, and I'll be pretty quick on this one, is basically I just do 5 things in the department. It's an easy job, isn't it? So I collect and process and provide data, so run some of our external data sharing activities. I run public and internal facing dashboards, which helps us manage the business and helps the sector who we're responsible for. I run a data advisory service, the knowledge information management team, and I also run a data compliance function. So that's all about creating the policies and standards and strategies, ensuring they get rolled out, understood and adhered to, which enables the wider data owners across the whole department, wherever they sit, to understand and act on their own accountabilities. So that's me. That's what I do. Now, Mohammed, you're going to share with us some of your views on how we get there.
So luckily for me, I don't have to do all of those things. I just have to come in and explain kind of how to do it with my flashy slides. So I suppose the first sort of starting point is, now that we know what you need to achieve and what that state looks like, how do you get there? Well, first of all, let's be clear about the problems we're solving, the value of solving those problems, and whose problems they are. Right? So we can talk in the abstract about things like, Snowflake or platforms or cloud or whatever, but really it's about connecting them to sort of on-the-ground issues and then rolling them up into outcomes where people can understand, if I was to fix that problem, this is the value that will materialize for me. So if we start kind of on the right-hand side, some really simple questions about the experience of using data within the business, right? How difficult is it to ingest data? If we go across to a number of projects where people are trying to build, whether it's some data scientists doing some analysis or we're looking to launch some new service, just at a basic fundamental level, how difficult is it to find the data you need and get access to it, right? How difficult is it to use things like data products? So to those sort of uninitiated with the concept, data products sort of makes data as consumable packages, essentially, right? So if I want to find something, it's consumable. I've got metadata, I've got APIs, I know how to get it, I know who to ask, right? To what extent does that exist? Where are the opportunities for cost savings in that process, right? And that doesn't have to just be financial costs, it can also be things like time cost, right? Things like data quality, things like use of cloud. So this isn't sort of starting the conversation at an abstract level and theoretical level. It's just very practically, if I go across to different teams, departments, projects, and I say, how difficult is it for you to get data? How difficult is it to manufacture data? How is it for you to get the approvals from whoever you need to get approvals from to use that data? Do you even know who those people are? If we roll that up to say, okay, well, a lot of that isn't just a tech problem, it's also a people problem. So why do those issues arise? Is it because of a lack of literacy? Is it because of a lack of the right skills? Is it because of a lack of capability around things like governance and quality and all sorts of stuff? Or are they cultural blockers? Are they that people just don't feel comfortable working with data, giving approvals for things, using cloud, this sort of stuff, right? And then if we roll that up into compliance things, so are there blockers? So if you go to areas of the business where they can technically solve it and they have the skills, but maybe the organization itself gets in the way, right? Maybe the processes themselves are kind of blockers, right? And then we can roll that up into outcomes, right? So then we can kind of say, well, instead of us having either a theoretical conversation at top level, we can say, if we were to make it easier specifically to get access to data of these types by improving literacy and capability of this particular skill set, and addressing this sort of ambiguity we have around compliance processes, then our outcome is we can accelerate XYZ project by so-and-so. And so the reason that's really important is not just building sort of measurable outcomes, but connecting that to on-the-ground issues and making it easy for sponsors to understand the practical implication of solving these data challenges that can often be quite abstract to people, right? So when you talk about things like data governance, what does that mean? Practically, how does that manifest? So that's sort of the first thing, is sort of understanding that. And then the second thing is, now that I understand not only where the challenges sit, and I've got my business stakeholders understanding the practical benefits of that, well, I need to execute. And to execute well, you need friends, right? And there's lots of different types of friends that you can have, right? So broadly, we've sort of broken them up into 4 areas. You've got strategic advisors. So these are the sort of people who come in with the vision and the strategy and the sponsorship, etc. Then you've got execution partners. So these are people who are actually going to build stuff for you. Then you've got capability and talent, which is less outcome driven, more about augmentation of particular skills and kind of literacy gaps. And then finally, technology and platform partners. And the key thing is not only knowing how to use them in different phases of your transformation, but also understanding that the way you measure their success is different. The way that you measure the impact of an execution partner is not the way you measure the impact of a technology partner, right? So in the case of strategy partners, most of them will deliver things like PowerPoints. What's the value of a PowerPoint? How can I connect that to how many sponsors do I now have who are willing to pay to fix these problems, right? How many business users do I now have on board who understand the value of data, right? How can I convert those PowerPoints that a lot of sort of strategy advisors might deliver into what's actually changed as a result of getting that deliverable? Similarly with the execution partners, right? It's not just about delivering program milestones. If we adopt a sort of product management mentality and you think about things like a data platform as features, it's not about whether I've delivered my data platform. It's like, what features are available? Do I now have X number of data scientists working on scalable infrastructure? What's the value of that, right? Capability and talent partners, really, I would say quality of staff, but also things like delivery metrics and cadence metrics, right? So if they've brought good people on board and those people are, effective, then you should find that your cadence and your delivery cadence for your projects, particularly if you're using things like Agile, should have accelerated. And then tech and platform partners, right? So if I'm partnering up with a Google or a Calibra or whoever it is, I want to understand what my metrics from that relationship are, right? So is it user adoption? Is it increase in literacy? Is it number of people trained? Is it percentage of data sources kind of being used on there? So our advice here is build the right network of friends, but also understand that different types of friends bring different value, and you need to measure their impact in different ways. And then finally, it's just this case of you don't want to be dependent long-term on these relationships working in a certain way, right? So ideally, you might start off with your consultants and friends in a sort of advisory role, and then they might move up into a fully owned delivery role where you just say to them, look, go and solve these problems for me. But over time, you really want to bring that more into a self-sustaining model, right? Where you think carefully about, is it worth outsourcing delivery of entire chunks of my transformation for the first 6 months, but then I want that knowledge transfer, I want that sort of skill set and capability to come back into my team. And again, it's not something you might have understood on day one, but at least having some kind of sense of, to what extent am I going to be dependent and over what period, right? And how do I get my own people in charge of this sort of stuff and move my consultants from execution more into sort of advisory positions? So I suppose just kind of wrapping up then on a quick sort of case study. So Crown Prosecution Service is a client that eSynergy has been working with for some time. The basic challenge here is lots of legal cases are in essentially analog format, lots of paperwork, lots of handwritten notes, very, very difficult to mine through that sort of information. So how do you come to what is a very archaic, very manual, very analog sort of environment and actually add next-gen capabilities onto that? So essentially, we helped the Crown Prosecution Service deliver a new case management system called Polaris. This is sort of cloud-based, AI-driven, text recognition, et cetera, converting that sort of analog, handwritten case information into actually digital, searchable information and shaving off hours and hours off of the time of lawyers and other legal professionals in mining through all of that. So it's a really good example of where you've got a very sort of old legacy estate, you've brought in really powerful technology on top of that, you've made those two things integrated without having to solve all the legacy challenges. You've adopted things like API-based consumption of information, so it's easy to not only find cases, but then build apps and analytics off of that technology that you've built. And then also introducing the organization to things like continuous development methods. So things like CI/CD, DevOps, product management, thinking like a technology business where what you're building is not a one-off project, but rather a continuously evolving sort of product, right? So interesting case study there. Obviously, we're happy to talk more about that if you come over and find us on our stall. Did you have any closing remarks, Neil?
The one bit, Mohammed, that you talked about that really docks with me is that curve of moving from outsourcing to in-housing to an advisory role. I feel very strongly that we should, as government, be in-housing as much as possible because it gives us added flexibility when policy changes, but it also builds fulfilling careers for the new generation of civil servants who are data or digital or tech professionals as well. But having that partnership to actually help us get to that place where we can fully run our own in-house services is really helpful.
Yeah, agreed. So questions. Okay, this is the questions. Right. Okay, excellent. All right. Well, I suppose I'll read them out and you can answer them, Neil. How about that? So there you go. So the first one's for you. Neil, how consistent is your CDO job description across governments?
It is variable. And the level of CDOs in different departments obviously depends on the size of the organisation and the size of their data challenge that they have as well. There are similarities, but I don't think one CDO in government is the same as any other CDO in government at all. What we do have, though, and I know you've got Sue Bateman talking to us later on today, who's the Government Chief Data Officer, we have a really, really close network of Chief Data Officers across all government departments that come together under the leadership of the Central Digital and Data Office. And something we're looking at the moment is how do you both standardise the role of Chief Data Officer, but also how do you know if your Chief Data Officer is any good if there's no one that knows what they're supposed to be doing in the organisation. So we need to link that across. How consistent is my job description across government? We've done that one. How can public sector departments attract people to such a post versus when offered on the private sector? Well, just look at some of the stuff that me and my colleagues do in government. So one of the big challenges for the children in this country is the post-pandemic attendance. You know, we still have over 22% of kids that are persistently absent, which means that they are still missing at least 10% of their allocated sessions in a school. Being able to lead a team that has scraped attendance registers of over 19,000 schools daily and feed back 19,000 bespoke dashboards back to the schools, back to the local authorities, back to the multi-academy trusts, so they can look at the problems, they can look at the challenges, they can compare themselves about similar schools in different parts of the country and actually do something about it. It's having a tangible difference on our children and our education sector. You don't really get that in the private sector, do you? So it's not just all about the salary and the money. It's about what actually can you do and how much of a difference can you make to society by being a civil servant. And I think that you know, to me, is much more valuable than sort of a big wad of paper.
I suppose there's one thing I just add on that private sector thing. It's a question about the nature of the CDO role as a sort of BAU versus transformational role. And I think a lot of people who are attracted to being a CDO is because it should be an inherently transformational role. So I think if you want to attract people from the private sector into public sector, it's not just, it's the role itself, but it's also what are you going to be achieving, right? And I think it's very important for CDOs to kind of have that mandate of, look, here's the problems and this is what future state looks like. It might be you bring in a CDO to set that vision, but I think the reward of a position like that isn't just the salary, it's the impact, right?
And I think we've got time for one last question. Something that popped up was, does the HR data come under my role? So really, really specifically, I don't do data for the whole department. I'm the policy lead for data. I do some data because what I've built is an engineering and architecture function that can do the new, the novel, the really big cross-cutting stuff. But what's more important is I should be setting the standards for whoever in the department needs to do data, because we all do data in our day-to-day job. HR data, no difference to the finance data, no difference to the data that's being used by our commercial colleagues as well. But if we can harmonise how we use it, we can harmonise best practice and we can harmonise the sorts of professions that we need to pull the most out of those data, then we can democratise the data in the organisation. Otherwise, if you centralise it all, you become the blocker rather than the enabler.
I think it's time for us to be thrown off stage. So thank you very much. And
Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you.